Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest Liz Moyer Benferhat, who's here to share with us From Collective Pain to Awareness. Are we carrying the pain of the world? And if so, how can awareness help us heal it? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Empath by nature and change maker by trade, Liz Moyer Benferhat has worked in the sustainable development field for nearly 20 years. She knows how much heart goes into caring about our world. This is why she launched We Heal for All in 2018 to support fellow helpers, healers, and change makers with the many normal feelings that come with being alive and in tune to the changes in our world. Through healing circles, writings, meditations, and trainings, she offers collective healing as a way to make sense of the world's pain and as a set of practices for what to do about it. So welcome to the show, Liz Moyer Benferhat.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh my goodness, I'm so delighted that we get to have another discussion. I found your work to be so empowering and so impactful. How did your understanding of emotional awareness evolve through your work in global development?
Yeah. Well, it was the first time that I learned about extreme poverty that actually filled me with such a strong emotional response that set me on the path that I've been in for the last 20 years. I find these days that it's not just burnout and overwhelm that people are experiencing in their daily lives. There's also something else that's harder to name for them. And we can chalk it up to it being the world's pain. And really, this more up close and personal relationship that we have with the world these days. And as challenging as that is, it's also full of opportunity because to be so close to the world means we have an opportunity to be part of its change. We just need the right tools to support us with those feelings in order to show up in more wholehearted and grounded ways. And this is where collective healing comes in. For me, it was the feelings I felt the first time I learned about extreme poverty that set me on that path. I had been on a track towards psychology and neuroscience. I always have had a keen interest in just my own inner world and the way that other people's inner worlds work, but feeling those feelings and really having my eyes open to a reality that was so different than mine. And this was, in particular, extreme poverty in sub Saharan Africa that made me step back and say, whoa, if I can channel this emotional energy in some kind of way, if I can channel this indignation, this even heartache, in this sense of righteousness, I think I could do something. I think I could be of service in some kind of way. So, fast forward nearly 20 years after working in the international development and sustainable development field, traditional field, it was seeing a gap there in terms of conversations and tools that support our hearts, that support us with those many normal feelings that come with paying attention and caring, that had me pivot and start building out this body of work around collective healing to support not only change makers and people in the traditional nonprofit field, but also everyday change makers, right? Those of us who are paying attention, who care, and who want to be part of this time of change.
Well, I think that so many people are feeling these real intense emotions and they're not really sure what to do with it, especially when we talk about, just like collective pain. So, how can we start to use our pain in a way that's purposeful for making positive change?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think even a strong starting point is to acknowledge the emotional impact that comes from caring about the world. I find that I often need to just remind people that the pain that they're feeling from the world, whether we call it collective pain or the world's pain, we can think about it in terms of collective wounds. They're very real and they can also be personal, meaning they can personally affect us. And in Western society, there's often a lens that is more individualistically focused, right? We more focus on the individual. And so it can be easy to forget that we are part of the world. We're part of collective bodies. We are part of communities. We're part of families. We're part of society at large. And so, of course, what's happening affects us, whether we're talking about climate change or political instability or systemic injustice. It can affect our mental well being. It can affect our work, depending on what kind of work we're doing, it can affect our relationships. I'm thinking about politics and the amount of division in our world right now and in our country, in the US specifically. So, of course, it affects us, right? It affects us because we are part of the world and because we care. And so, while that is challenging, and it's in particular, there's a new kind of challenge within it too. Yes, there's always been crises or chaos or change that has happened all throughout history. We are not new in that regards, but we are the first point in history to have such a front row seat to it all, right? This age of awareness, this age of information and media gives us such a palpable relationship, such an up close and personal relationship with everything that's happening. So, of course, it impacts us, but there's also opportunity and possibility in that. There is an opportunity to use what we're feeling and actually even see what we're feeling not as something that's a mistake or that needs to be shoved down and pushed away or overridden, but that the emotions that we're feeling are actually intelligent information about what needs to change, whether it is our own role in society or shifts in our own values as it relates to the environment or relates to politics or even relates to being a parent. Um, and then also how we want to then use that energy in our own lives and then in society at large.
So, how do cultural differences shape the way people process and express emotional pain, especially when we look at it on a global level?
That's such a great question. I am trained by emotions educator Hilary Jacobs Hendel, and she is a clinical psychologist and emotions educator. She is the the brilliant researcher and clinician behind the Change Triangle, which is a map for understanding our internal world. And so she teaches that emotions are actually universally felt similarly across cultures, across the globe. And so when I say that, I mean, we can think about emotions as just being a bundle of physiological responses, right? Emotions live in our body and take place in our body. And so anger makes us feel big, right? Anger, you can think of mama bear protecting her cubs. Anger makes us get big and loud in order to protect our resources or defend what's important to us. The emotion of anger feels similarly for people across cultures, but the culture that people live in can attribute different things to emotions, right? So, for instance, shame is a really interesting one. There's research out there that shows that in more individualistic societies like America, as opposed to more collectivist societies like in Japan, experiences of shame are different. So for us as Americans, I'll speak for myself, but I also find this just across the people that I work with, is that shame is excruciating, right? Shame's the worst, right? It really, it's just so painful because the idea of getting kicked out is really confusing and it's so heartbreaking. Whereas in Japan, where there's a more collectivist society, meaning there's more of a value in being part of a collective body and really in that cultural setting, shame is actually seen as something helpful, right? It's like, oh, I feel ashamed about not wearing my mask in public. Oh, that's actually helpful to me to course correct because I really value what the collective thinks and really the health of the collective. And so I always found that really interesting that emotions can feel the same across cultures, but the cultural interpretation of that can be different.
So, how does it look like when a community begins to heal collectively?
Yeah. So this looks different across the board, but when it comes to the issues that we as a world, and I'll ground this in the United States because right now we're going through so much politically, economically, socially, culturally. There's just so much that's happening for us right now. And it's honestly too big for any of us to hold on our own. The topics themselves, I want to say existential nature, but I don't want to be dramatic in saying that. But it really, there's a real on edge feeling that so many have these days because of the magnitude of the issues of war and just even everyday living, right? Thinking about the future for their kids, for themselves, etc. And so the reality is that these topics are too big to hold on our own. And so we really need community space. And that can even just look like one other person who is emotionally safe for you to be able to hold these topics together, to be able to come to and lay down our weary hearts, to lay down what it is that we are thinking about, that we're chewing on, that we're grappling with, that we're even just feeling in our bodies, and to almost distribute the load, if you will. Because the beauty of coming together in a group setting, the beauty of having even one other person across from you, one other person walking with you and holding your hand or holding hands together, is that it helps to support what is too tough to bear on our own. So there's a lot of beautiful things. And, I use a circle model that I've designed and worked on over the last 8 years. It's my We Heal for All circle model. And it uses meditation, it uses storytelling or soulful sharing, and it uses resonance practice, which is a form of embodied empathy to support people to slow down, come into their bodies, and share what's on their hearts, speak about their personal lived experiences with what's going on in the world, what's going on in their own lives. And what I find here is that there it's so helpful just to be seen and to be heard. Emotions like to be validated, they like to be named. So that helps to move that emotional energy. It helps the energy to be processed so that it can unearth gold. It's this term within the field of healing centered sciences or the science of how emotions work. It's called adaptive tendencies. So every core emotion has this. It's the intelligence baked within it that's telling us what we need or where we need to go. But then there's also something really beautiful about listening to other people's stories, listening to other people's experiences, even if they're wildly different from our own in circle practice, because we are practicing this embodied empathy where we're staying really connected to ourselves, really rooted in our hearts and in our bodies, We actually listen below the surface of the story that the person's telling and attune ourselves or relate to and connect with the emotional energy that's underneath what they're saying. That place of shared humanity, that place of, whoa, I feel that. I know exactly what they're talking about, even if I haven't lived that. And so there's this really beautiful dynamic that happens. It's almost, I want to use the word magical in some ways, but it's really just the way that our nervous systems work. It's really rooted in this interpersonal neurobiology of where we are wired for connection. And so, actually, hearing someone else's story can actually help process and move and shift things within us. So, tying this back to the world's pain, tying this back to even, when tragedy happens within a group setting, within a community setting, I'm thinking about a school shooting or any kind of tragedy that happens within a specific setting. Having people come together to be able to process, to be able to grieve, to be able to hear different experiences, to be able to even make sense of what happened, what is going to happen, where they're going to go next, co creating all that is really necessary and really helpful and supportive to help a community move forward.
So, in your view, what is the relationship between empathy and effective leadership, especially today?
Empathy is a powerful tool for systems change. And when I think about systems change, one of the key things that it asks us to do is it asks us to understand the system. It asks us to understand all of the different puzzle pieces, all of the different parts, all of the different corners, and all of the different experiences that take place within that system. So we can think about that in terms of sectors and industries. We can think about that in terms of supply chains and operations. And then, of course, we can also think about that in terms of people, in terms of the people who are at the heart of all of those systemic components. And so, what empathy helps us to do is it helps us to listen, it helps us to learn, it helps us to bring people together in a room, what can be called multi-stakeholder gatherings or participatory methods of developing programs and policies. And it helps us not only do that just to pay lip service to the need for diverse representation or because we think it's the right thing to do, but actually building our own skill set in empathy where we actually are self-aware enough to know whether or not we're listening and the place from which we're listening, right? Are we listening? The Presencing Institute is I'll circle back to that thought, but the Presencing Institute is a really big influence for me in this. They are a nonprofit organization tied to MIT who does amazing work around awareness-based systems change. And they have a model of 4 levels of listening that really teach people and even give people a framework to think about, okay, am I listening to what this person is saying just to be ready to debate, right? Am I actually present with what they're saying, or am I actually formulating the response that I want to say uh, as they're speaking? Or am I actually listening from a place of empathy, from a place of attuning to their experience and seeking to understand? Which, even as I say that, when I think about debating somebody, my body is becoming more upright. I'm I'm more activated. I'm ready to rumble, right? Whereas if I'm listening from a place of empathy, I'm actually a little bit more relaxed in my body. There's a softening, there's a receptivity. And so, again, when it comes to systems change, when it comes to bringing people together in order to understand the system, to be able to learn more about how, let's say, a project or a program or a policy decision will impact many different parts of the system. Like, is this actually going to achieve what we're hoping that it's going to achieve? Which is really, that's the core of what an effective leader does. An effective leader wants to design and put things out into the world that are effective. So there's much more I could say about this too, but that's one of the core ways that empathy and leadership are tied to each other.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with us because I am just always intrigued how you bring all of these aspects together because they not only complement each other, there's so much overlap that happens that people just aren't aware of, and you really highlight that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I appreciate you saying that because we're definitely moving in a direction as a world towards more representation, towards more diversity, which is amazing. It is an ongoing process. It is a long time coming to reach the point that we're at right now. So much to celebrate. And there's also continued work to be done to really integrate the value of empathy, the value of bringing people together. And you know what? It makes me think about another definition of leadership, and it's actually a systems leadership definition that moves away from a top down approach to leadership, where a leader is thought of as the person at the top who has all the answers and then just distributes it downward, right? They decree what needs to be done and everyone else does it, and instead repositions the leader within the organizational setting to be the person who actually creates the conditions for people to come together and generate their own solutions or come up with ideas to test and prototype. And so, in this way, they create more of a feedback loop within their organizational setting that helps them still, stand at the helm and make sure that the mission is at the center of everything that is done, that the scope of work stays within a certain frame, but that really utilizes and taps into all of the creative energy and intelligence that exists within their team. And so, again, if we think about empathy, and underneath empathy is really self awareness, is the ability to understand oneself and have capacities like reflection, or the ability to receive feedback, or the ability to realize something about yourself or something about the environment that you're in and be able and willing to change course. And so all of those skills, which are traditionally thought of as soft skills, are so needed and important in this paradigm shift, if you will, towards more of a systems way of approaching business and organizations and even thinking about the world.
So earlier you mentioned the circles. Can you share about that with us again and how people can get involved and where they can just find more information on your work, how to work with you, and of course your book, When the World Hurts?
Yeah, absolutely. So the circles that I offer are really the bread and butter of the practice portion of how I approach collective healing. I think about collective healing as both a lens or a way to make sense of the times that we live in and the world's pain. For instance, are we inherently doomed, or is there actually opportunity and possibility baked into these times? And spoiler alert, my take is that there there is, and I go into that in depth in my book. And then circles, the circle model that I've developed is really where all of this is put into practice. It's one thing to have a narrative or a perspective on the times that says, okay, there's actually possibility and opportunity here. But then it's another thing to figure out how to bring that into our lives. And so the circle model that I have, it's community space. You can think about it almost like a yoga class or a community care pod where we come together and it's really about our personal lived experiences with what's going on within ourselves, what's going on out in the world. And they're quite beautiful. They're beautiful. They're co creative. They are not about me as the facilitator coming with answers. It's actually about all of us both teaching and learning, right? It is a very horizontal space in that way. And the beauty of the model, too, is so it uses tools from the healing centered sciences. So how we know that emotions work in our mind and body. And the model is designed in a way that it can be adapted to different contexts, to different topics, different settings. So it could be brought into a workplace through the HR department, or it can be brought into a retreat setting out in, the mountains of Pennsylvania. Um, it's really meant to serve whoever it needs. And so I offer these monthly through the work that I do at We Heal for All, which you can learn more about through my website. It's wehealforall.com. That's FOR.com. And I also offer a training that teaches people the model and supports them to take it and make it their own and really plug in their unique healing wisdom and, you know, the needs of your community best. And so this model and the training is just here to support you to take it and make it your own and serve them.
Well, Liz, you're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It is such a pleasure and an honor. Thank you, Marianne.
Well, thank you, Liz. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your book, When the World Hurts, Why the World's Pain Makes Sense, and what you can do about it. Make sure to visit Liz's website at wehealforall.com. Be part of her community, learn more about her book, and of course, join one of her circles. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.